Hello. Well, at the conference itself, we were having some IT difficulties with recording my talk during the plenary session. And so I am happily recording this so that it can be shared more widely. So I was and am super honored to be with everyone in the Public Administration Theory Network. This is a vital group in my community of practice. And being a theorist in an applied field like public administration, and a critical theorist at that, can be an isolating experience. I have cherished this network since joining 20 years ago. That was the year of the conference in Omaha that was hosted by Richard Box and his colleagues. But before becoming a scholar, I was a practitioner of community development. And here we are, convening a conference to consider public administration in communities, the primary domain of county and local governments that tend to get short shrift in our field scholarship. So, as a practitioner, I was the founding executive director of the Northwest Tempe Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation and Community Land Trust, or Newtown for short. I worked closely with local government and community planning and continued my work as a neighborhood activist and advocate for sustainable development. In fact, when returning to doctoral studies at Arizona State, I considered urban planning, but being more interested in policy than architectural design, I ended up choosing public administration. So even back in the early 1990s, we understood the term sustainability to apply to social, economic, and physical development of our community. In fact, our mission was to create a sustainable urban village in the heart of the Phoenix metropolitan area. While that may sound de rigueur today, this was at the height of urban sprawl and way before things like a widespread turn toward policies that enable citizen votes on general plans, mixed-use zoning, pedestrian and transit-oriented design, traffic calming, mixed income housing, and citizen police review boards. Gentrification was seen as a good thing, obliterating long-standing neighborhoods and replacing them with culturally and economically displacing development and newcomers. So our efforts push back against gentrification and for more sustainable practices that empowered neighbors, which included those with a wide array of ethnic, racial, and economic backgrounds. As an example, in our elementary school, 26 languages were spoken, from several Native American tribes to those from nations across the Americas, Asia, and Africa. I couldn't have dreamed of a better community in which to raise my child as a citizen of the world. So why are we talking about this stuff now? For me, due to the persistent organizing and action, we enjoyed somewhat of a golden period up until the turn of the new century. As I put it in a reflective autoethnographic study sometime later, climbing the ladder of citizen participation in a comprehensive neighborhood planning and development effort was successful, but it was short-lived. Today, downtown Tempe and the environs of the main campus of Arizona State University have utterly transformed. I no longer recognize my home, and the forces of gentrification have won for the most part. So the questions that I ask now are these. What should we be doing differently? Where should we turn our governance gaze? And how do we engage in thoughtful, reflective, and reflexive praxis? These questions aren't terribly different from those I asked in 1994 as I first stepped into neighborhood advocacy. But my answers today are a bit different. So taking on the first question, what should we be doing differently today? Regardless of our area of expertise and action, we need to think and do holistically and comprehensively, either on our own or with others through collaborative governance. Without getting into the problematic terminology, perhaps the most useful tool that I've garnered from the field of community development is the community capital framework. Now, the categories and label differ by source. Mine includes 8: cultural, human, relational, organizational, political, financial, natural, and built forms of capital. Now, every community holds these assets to one degree or another. And it's helpful because when thinking about the 3 pillars of sustainability, they easily nest together. Social justice requires cultural, human, and relational capital. Economic equity requires organizational, political, and financial capital. And environmental resilience requires natural and built capital together. So, shameless plug here. As can be seen in my most recent book with Mark Roseland and Maria Spiliatopoulou, Towards Sustainable Communities, Solutions for Citizens and Their Governments. We can use this community capital framework as somewhat of a compass in orienteering and ensuring that interdependent factors and actions are comprehensively and systematically considered. That's an image that was created by my colleague Eve Fox at West Virginia University, and we hope that it is making sense of the complexity of the community capital framework. There's always technical difficulties. So this approach requires community stakeholders to share a model for change that centers both sustainability and community assets. So I want to give a shout out to Angie Eikenberry, Roseanne Mirabella, and Billy Sandberg for urging me to generate the initial diagram for my chapter in their edited volume. The second edition is about to come out, called Reframing Nonprofit Organizations, Democracy, Inclusion, and Social Change. Thanks so much for getting me to work with Eve to create this diagram. So this process model is based on my own experiences as a community developer in my own neighborhoods that have been sort of systematized and used for research and teaching purposes. Working from the outside in this diagram, I don't know if my cursor is showing up, but we're going to work from the outside in on the diagram. The community actors include residents and their informal groups, governments, businesses, anchor institutions, and other nonprofits. So essentially all sectors need to be leveraged and aligned for successful community change efforts. Now, hopefully these actors engage in community change in a variety of ways. Some focus on catalyzing action, facilitating collaboration, and building capacity for change. Others actually invest in, create, or protect community assets. So for the best alignment, these activities take place within an intentional, coordinated process that moves through raising awareness, mobilizing engagement, conducting baseline assessment, visioning and planning, implementation of those plans, and evaluation of their effectiveness. Of course, we all know that it is never that tidy and linear, nor is it ever finished. It's an ongoing iterative relational process of collaborative governance. But to ensure that the community change process is thinking and doing holistically, attention does need to be given to all 3 areas of concern: social justice, economic equity, and environmental resilience. These categories help us to understand how the various forms of community capital work together in closely interdependent sets, with the overall goal of sustainability reminding us of the myriad interconnections at play across all of them. But there's also the issue of when and how. So the pursuit of sustainability has an important developmental path that helps us ensure that we reach the destination sought. I argue that we must start with social justice. I say this because community power dynamics will not be healthy and just if we emphasize economic and physical development without being driven by the community's cultural values and human resonance through relational practice. In fact, I've argued in community development scholarship that culture is the foundational driver in this process of community change. Now, our dominant culture is actually what we call dominance culture. It's grounded in Anglo-European worldviews and lifeways, and it demands assimilation rather than integrative transformation of the systemic sources of injustice, inequity, and environmental degradation. This perspective is informed by my body of public administration scholarship on the ontological foundations of theory and practice, much of which was developed with my colleague Janine Love at Roosevelt University. The bottom line is that how we see and understand reality fundamentally shapes all concepts and actions that follow. So this kind of perspective leads me to the next question. Where should we turn our governance gaze? As a practitioner, I focused on transforming my community, doing quite a lot of on-the-ground work in organizing, development, and service delivery. But this also required extensive efforts in policy advocacy, including issues like land use planning, zoning and building ordinances, community policing, and partnerships across government agencies, nonprofits, foundations, and businesses. I had learned the importance of collaborative governance in prior years, working as a consultant with the Arizona Strategic Partnership for Economic Development. It's this policy level work that seems most important today, particularly for anyone who's not of the community in question. At this point in our political and economic trajectory, I firmly believe our gaze should be laser focused on institutional systems change and transformation. And as public administration and public policy scholars, this is where we have the privilege to work and the right type of knowledge to do so effectively. Systems change begins with policy change, which is driven by cultural attitudes and norms in those social institutions. And as someone with mostly gray and white hair, I really admire those under 40 who are up to what they are up to these days in terms of redefining identity and family, engaging in community organizing around both interests and places, building the social economy, and fighting for their future in a sustainable planet. Many of my students are demanding that public education return to its broader democratic purposes rather than just producing grist for the capitalist mill. Writ large, I believe their collective aim appears to be centered on social justice, on economic equity, and environmental resilience. In short, these are generations in hot pursuit of sustainability. Now, not many of us have the opportunity to accompany these efforts in our own neighborhoods and cities as part of our work responsibilities. But when we do, we must work with our community rather than doing something for or to it as an outsider. But even then, we must be sensitive to our own positionality vis-a-vis our neighbors, which leads me to the last and perhaps most important question. How do we engage in thoughtful, reflective, and reflexive praxis? Now, most of us at this conference are in the academy in one way or another, so I want to talk about our role as institutional representatives. Most of us engage in some type of applied research, since that's the bulk of our discipline's literature. But if we are researching or serving communities, we are also community-engaged scholars. Volumes are written on this topic, and aligned practices like service learning, participatory action research, and university community partnerships. My own work over the last 15 years at West Virginia University integrated service learning and participatory action research through an apprenticeship-style MPA emphasis in local governance and community development. Now, that also expanded into a graduate certificate in community development policy and practice. And that set of courses was integrated into a PhD in human and community development in a different college. I want to provide some detail about this program today because I think it provides a useful model for community engaged work in our field. So going back to this community change model that I presented, the course curriculum includes, I'm very sorry about this. The course curriculum includes social equity in public service, local governance, public engagement, community planning, sustainable community development, and sometimes program evaluation. And so as you can see, this is tracking along that process that we described, which of course is nicely linear in the curriculum, but quite iterative in practice. Now, I call this, course series sort of a community change process that moves from, sort of organizing toward change to leading implementation. Knowledge scaffolding within the courses begins always with theory, the why, where are we doing this, and then moves on into practice skills, the how do we do this. And then application happens through individual and group reflection on the experience of service learning. It's really important in that process to explore whether theory and practice were actually aligned. Now, the core aims of empowering participatory relational practice are the common threads that run throughout this course series. The entire set is conducted in collaboration with the host community over a 2-year period. And it really helps working within a land-grant institution because they had an expansive extension service that greatly supported these relationships over the last 15 years. So taking these one at a time, based on student feedback, the Social Equity in Public Service course has produced very profound, transformative experiences. I've described this course in detail in my chapter in Sean McCandless and Susan Gooden's new book, Teaching Social Equity in Public Administration. Now, this is mostly a theory course, exploring concepts and associated facts of societal systems, social equity, oppression, social identities, privilege, intersectionality, white culture, and transformational empowerment through building self-efficacy, solidarity, and agency, often in trauma-informed practice. However, these very deep and complex concepts are also applied through community storytelling circles that help us learn and reflect on how the residents and stakeholders in the host community experience power dynamics, particularly in relationship to institutions, and particularly more so with West Virginia University, our institution. Local governance introduces students to the institutions, powers, processes, and operations of local governments, and how they engage in intergovernmental and intersectoral collaborative governance. The course further introduces the basic components of quality of life in communities as the aims being pursued by these actors. This is where the community capital framework is introduced because it organizes key factors that contribute to well-being. Application is through a community profile or baseline assessment that's created using both secondary and primary participatory data collection. The next course, Public Engagement, introduces the rationale for participatory practice in a democratic context and explores how to design public engagement in public policymaking, planning, and program implementation. These skills include mobilization and facilitation of participatory dialogue and deliberation, with application to an actual visioning and planning process and evaluative reflection on the results. Now, community planning students work in concert with the public engagement students, but their focus is on the substantive content side of the planning process. Here, a deeper dive is taken into the factors of quality of life, learning promising practices for elements in a comprehensive community plan. Different approaches to planning are offered, along with the rationale for why participatory planning is the most effective method because it integrates the expert knowledge with lived experience. Students follow the community's goals and objectives to research and recommend strategies for action using a logic model plan structure grounded in the community profile. The next course, Sustainable Community Development, takes the deepest dive into strategies for action. Based on priorities derived by the community from their comprehensive plan, at least 3 project implementation plans are generated. One to advance each of the community's social, economic, and physical development goals. Of course, given their interdependence, each project typically advances more than one aim, and we intentionally seek to identify such synergies during the prioritization and selection process with the host community. Now, even if we aren't always able to include the program evaluation course, those project plans are designed toward evaluation. When we're able to develop evaluation plans through program evaluation course, it's very advantageous, especially as the projects move into fundraising and resource development. So that course builds the methods to assess whether we're moving the needle on aims that were established in the baseline assessment and community planning. And we use both process and outcomes evaluation. So this fleshes out that logic model approach used in strategic planning and sets the community up for continued implementation activities. So throughout the entire service learning project, the host community is given the opportunity to review and amend final documents before their delivery to ensure that the reports and the plans are accurate in their understanding and representation of the community's will. So with that overview of my own praxis, I'd like to turn this talk into a conversation. So for those of you who are pursuing community engaged scholarship, how do you employ thoughtful, reflective, and reflexive praxis? As we share, let's all feel free to ask one another questions and give one another feedback. As a note, in the conference actual, it was really robust and wonderful conversation about specifically the importance that representation is never done without an approach that really is consistently checking back with community folk and making sure that what we carry forward is definitely aligned with what their will is. So that sort of continual checking back and forth is most critical in these processes. I did offer a note that my title had changed to Professor Emerita at West Virginia University. And so undergoing sort of what they called academic transformation, the public administration department, all of its programs and all of its tenured faculty were terminated. And that was as of May 9th of 2024. So I'm very eager to sort out my next steps in community development, whether they will be in the academy or in practice. And I would very much like to export my beloved graduate program and to another institution and help in mentoring junior faculty in its delivery. So if you have any ideas along those lines for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. I can still be contacted through WVU as Professor Emerita, and I very much look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for your participation.